Eckhart Tolle has written a book called The Power of Now. Talks about staying in the moment, staying present, what that entails. He gets a lot of this teaching from Buddhism, Eastern mysticism. He tries to bring it to the West with his part German, part British accent. It's very pleasing to us. But there's a huge error in his approach to human psychology. And in this error, and the fact that he misses this error, it's going to cause even greater problems, according to him. It's going to cause us to be even less in the present. It's going to cause us to be even less in the now. In the long term. In the short term, it probably feels good to practice these techniques. But in the long term, it's going to cause even more problems. And in fact, the exact opposite of his original intention. And this clip is from a Q&A portion from, I'm guessing, one of his lectures. We're going to cut out the question, which was essentially, how do I stop thinking excessively? I'm always thinking. How do I stop this? And here's Eckhart Tolle's answer.
Now, there's a lot of talk these days about, not just talk, actually it's happening, addictions. Many people are addicted to all kinds of things, substances. But one of the greatest addictions, or rather the greatest addiction, you never read about it in the papers, because the people who are addicted to it don't know it. It's the addiction to thinking. It's actually addictive. Can't stop thinking. It's like can't stop drinking, can't stop smoking, can't stop eating, can't stop thinking. Thinking is the greater addiction than any of these. And it's an addiction because it's been a drug, it's been around for so long, and it's a pseudo sense of self. So it's a great reluctance on the part of most people to let go of thinking, which is equated with the state of sleep, to let go of thinking. There isn't that much to understand in this teaching. There's a little bit to understand about how the ego works, but even that is just mainly a self-observation. The main thing about it is presence.
Yeah, this is going to be slow. This guy talks like he has all the time in the world. This guy, I think he really believes in reincarnation. This is how people talk if they believe in reincarnation, because if you think you're coming back, then what's the rush? Dude, let's speed this up a little bit. But this is true. Thinking is an addiction. We can be addicted to thinking. But there's two problems with this. One is, thinking in itself isn't the addiction. It is the result of being in an addictive state. Those are two very different things. We avoid anxiety enough. Look at the anxiety diagram. We avoid anxiety enough. And what is the natural manifestation of that? Obsessive thoughts, compulsive disorders, OCD. What we're talking about here is obsessive thoughts. Thoughts that you cannot stop having. And of course, we see the problem with this. He says it's excessive thinking, or thinking in general. Now we have thinking, perhaps one of the greatest things you'll ever be able to do, using your mind to reach out and figure out what's going on in reality. We have that conflated with obsessive thoughts. So now all thinking becomes bad. And, we're probably not going to continue because, again, he talks like he's living for 1,000 years. But let's continue on to another one of his points here.
Your choice then is not to understand more or to bring some intellectual analysis to the practice, but to practice the state of not thinking, which can be arrived at by various ways, as you probably know. If you don't think about it, just do it. Becoming more aware of the present moment and accept it as it is, slows down the overactive mind, is one thing. Because a lot of the overactivity of the mind is an attempt to get away from the isness, the simplicity of the present moment.
So it's good to think a little bit, but not too much, putting thought on a continuum, when in fact you're talking about two different kinds of thinking. And one's not even a kind of thinking. You call it thinking because you can't identify it for what it is, obsessive thoughts. That's not really thinking. That's a distraction from the pain of anxiety, which is a completely different animal than, let's just say, reading Aristotle. Continuing.
So, to become more aware of the present moment as a practice, have perhaps little pointers in your office, at home, in your car. Let's say present moment or whatever, or a symbol for it. And there are different entry points into the present moment. Present moment awareness means thinking subsides, may not disappear completely, but something else arises that is primary. We call it presence or awareness. Buddhists call it mindfulness, which I don't use because it implies your mind is full of things, but it isn't, of course. It's just a mistranslation. So,
oh boy, this is tough. This is really difficult to listen to. God, talk with some sort of intensity. Talk like you really have something to say. So what he's going to do here is give you a bunch of techniques to become more aware in the present. This is how we break the supposedly more addictive state. More addictive state, it's not an addictive state, but more addictive way of being than even substances or anything else. This is more addictive than fentanyl, according to him, what he just said, thinking. And the way we break this addiction is to simply become more aware of the present. Have a flower to look at. Have constant reminders around your office, around your home, to become more aware of the present. That's how we're going to break addiction? One of the worst addictions in the world, according to you, even though it's not, but whatever, let's just go with what you're saying. Dealing with reality is going to be a fight. The implication being you are ultimately not set up to be a part of reality. So trying to stay in the moment, trying to stay present, the power of now, it's going to be this constant fight to overcome, so to speak, your lower self. We have a mind-body dichotomy in here, of course. I mean, he got a lot of his teachings from Eastern mysticism. Mind-body dichotomy is implicit, at the very least. Overcome yourself. Do not incorporate yourself. Quell your lower self. Do not use it to infuse who you are. To become more psychologically healthy, therefore, you become less a part of the world. Mind, body, split. And why is this not going to work? Because you don't get to the root of the issue, the fact that your obsessive thoughts are caused by anxiety. And what's anxiety caused by? Threats you are not confronting, but you don't understand that, Eckhart Tolle. You don't really have an understanding of human psychology until you understand emotions and how they work. How could you? So you're going to fight with the emotion. Arguing with yourself, essentially, therefore becoming less a part of yourself. That's going to make you more anxious. In the long run, that's going to make you more anxious. Continuing.
to be present, first of all, use the present moment to become, but how do you become conscious of the present moment? Now, when you get it, after a while, you can actually sense the presence of the present, so to speak, directly, and there it is. But helpful things are sense perceptions, take you out of thinking. If you're not judging the sense perceptions, labeling, naming, looking around, anywhere, wherever you are, look around. Practice sense perceptions without this compulsive interference of naming what you're perceiving. Oh, that's a beautiful flower. I wonder what it's called. I don't know what it's called, so that helps. I can be free of thinking. If I know what it's called, I can say, oh, that's such, and then drop that. And see what it means to perceive.
So there's an example, one of the techniques. Sense perceptions. Focus on sense perceptions to take you out of thinking. Overcome the most powerful addiction in the world by looking at a flower. Continuing.
You're looking at me. Now, Let's say between now and now, were you thinking? No. Okay. And again, between now and now, were you thinking or present? No thought. And while I speak, do you need to think to understand what I'm saying, or can you just listen and understand it?
Just listen.
And this is what you're doing. And so that's part of the teaching and the function of the spiritual teacher. Imparting information is secondary. What I'm telling you now is secondary.
And you know why this guy's really in the present while you're talking? It's not because you're talking so much. It's because I'm sure he must have confronted some sort of anxiety to come up and give you a question in front of this whole audience. So for the next few moments, he's going to be calm, at least for the next few moments. And that's of course what this guy really needs, and all of us need when we find ourselves caught up in obsessive thoughts, compulsive behaviors. We need to have conversations. That is 95% of our confrontation of anxiety. What conversations are we avoiding? What are we avoiding talking about in those conversations? What is it that we're hiding from other people, from ourselves, from the world, whatever it happens to be? These threats, perceived, real, otherwise, doesn't matter. How do we make the best use out of those threats that we possibly can? But we can't do that unless we first look at the anxiety, feel the anxiety, really understand, get in touch, put all our psychic feelers out there, get in touch where it's really coming from, and what we could do to manage it in a productive way. The natural state is to be in the present. Well, not only to be in the present, but the future too. That's another problem with the power now. It's all about now. Well, yeah, we want to be in the future too, and that's what managing your anxiety is. You're looking at the now and figuring out what's the best way to use this now, whatever my feelings are now, to create the best possible future for myself. And, of course, thinking about the past is great too, because that's how we learn lessons. That's the point of learning history. Not just world history, but the history of you. So you're gathering up whatever evidence you can from the present to create the future. You're being in the present and in the future. So the reason why we emphasize now over, the past, true, but even the future, is because the world doesn't make any sense. This is another aspect of the mind-body dichotomy, another demonstration of it. If the world doesn't make sense, if our emotions don't make any sense, then what's the point of even focusing on these? Just set up flowers and reminders all around your house or apartment and just focus on that. Focus on those. Be in the present. Have this calm, serene way of being. But it's all a distraction. It's just another fancy way to distract yourself. Just like the thoughts were a fancy way to distract yourself. Just like alcohol, marijuana, and more fancy ways to distract yourself. It's all the same. This is just another way of doing that. And that's what we're going to have to keep doing until we learn to manage our anxiety, until we learn to feel our anxiety. First, we have to learn how our anxiety works. AnimusEmpire.com, ebooks, therapy, group. It's all there for you. But yeah, there's a way out of the fighting. There's a way out of arguing with yourself. There's a way out of all the conscious intention placed on things outside of you. There's a way out of seeing yourself as ultimately unfit to live on this earth. And maybe it seems improbable, but hear me now, believe me later, it all comes from learning how your emotions work.